Okay, so here on section 2, we go into our great circles. The sacred geometry of the great circles is basically a very complex mathematical basis of mapping our Earth. The great circles on the Earth, as we see in this illustration, show the South Pole down here, our North Pole up at the top. This is the galactic equator, which there's a tremendous correlation between the galactic center, which is at 26 Sagittarius 55-56 minutes. So that represents that great circle. The ecliptic circle is the one that we see here, which is the sun's apparent path with the Earth, its own orbit, or Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer, our 4 cardinal angles of the year. Our seasonal cycles come off of that. And we have our prime vertical, which runs from the zenith to the nadir. That's our prime vertical intersection. Our equatorial based cycles are off our center of our planet, which is the equator we can see here. So all our cycles based off the equator are at those intersections. And our ecliptic runs 23.5 degrees above the equator. And the 00 Aries point are when the ecliptic and the equator cross and meet. And that's on the spring, the first day of spring, our spring equinox. So all these intersections basically projected into the heavens and create our star relationships, our orientation, and all the relationships to each other. Basically, they're unique based on your horizon. So depending on where you are on the Earth and the globe, your horizon will also be another great circle. And these basically make up our personal sacred geometry. This has been almost never discussed in trading. I don't know of any other trader who's ever discussed this or who uses this or who's approached this from a mathematical point of view to find intersections that would allow us to reveal time or price relationships. So this great circle is quite powerful, but from a market point of view, I believe is also quite unique. So this is something we have to study on quite a bit on. Now we're going to go into some historic correlation. One of the things that Gann had suggested was study the past and you will know the future. This is a cycle that occurred in 12/6/1974, December 6, 1974. During that window of time, there were some major historic cycles that had hit, which allowed a major low to occur in the Dow and the S&P. The cycles throughout the last century, if you study them, you can get data back to 1792. And one of the things that enables you to do is study all the historical cycle turns and swings, highs and lows, for over 208 years. We're closer to 215 now. So from 1792 to 2000 is 208 years. One of the powerful studies to do with all cycles is to study all the major swings, because it reveals a tremendous amount when you actually study history. So in this case, this precedenting low, which was quite powerful for a number of years, occurred because Neptune was conjunct the node. Neptune is a powerful ruler of the S&P, and as we see here, the conjunction of the north node, and it was 180 degrees the south node. So here's our 180 degrees the south node, and Neptune was conjunct the north node. There was also a stellium. Now the stellium is 3 or more planets together in the same sign. So in this case, we had quite a few planets in this historic low, which was a stellium opposed to our past karma, or the south node. There would be a change of mass consciousness. There's a big change of mass consciousness. The market had dropped from 1966 into this low. And in 1974, this historic low was created from a powerful conjunction of Neptune conjunct the north node. This again is a nodal cycle, as we talked of earlier, and quite powerful of an event. So as you go through cycles and go through the relationships around the wheel, here in the upper wheel, we're looking at a geozodiac, and in the lower wheel, we're looking at a heliozodiac. This again allows you to compare both the physical and the spiritual, which is what I believe the geo represents our spherical, mundane body and mundane way of life, and the helio, which I believe are more powerful, represents more of a spiritual or our consciousness. So our higher consciousness is ruled by helio. So we'll talk about this more as we go forward. So here in 12.6.74, we see a powerful stellium opposing a powerful S&P ruler of Neptune. Now this move was a market major historic event. 500 points up for the day in a single move on the Dow. What this brings me to is the idea of how powerful this unique cycle of Venus and Pluto are. I believe their pairing is one of the most powerful to the stock market consistently for the last 100 years. From an inner planet relationship particularly, of the whole inner set, Venus stands out to Pluto. Venus, as we know, represents prices and values. 180 degrees is a second harmonic. Pluto is the power of big business institutions. So we're going to see a change of prices and values in a powerful way with big business money coming into the market, heliocentrically, from a consciousness point of view. So here is our Venus opposed to Pluto, our relationship between Venus opposed to Pluto, and on that same day we had an Earth conjunction, so that also was a timer or a trigger. And what else here that was quite outstanding was the volume or the amplitude of 500 points. We will see numerous other scenarios with Venus and Pluto and how the power of this pair is truly outstanding. It's unique amongst any other cycle that there is. And in this case, this was a helio Venus-Pluto, which made it even stronger. Okay, here is the historic low of 1932. This low has been a low for almost 80-something years. The power of this low, again, came from a trigger of a Venus 180 Pluto cycle. This is a historic low at the 20th century. Here you can see Venus and Helio opposed to Pluto again. So again, we see our Venus opposed to Pluto right here, and we can see Venus opposed to Pluto. This low in 1932 was what ended the 1929 crash. So what stopped the power and energy of 1929 came into a Venus 180 Pluto, which is the second harmonic and the second strongest relationship that exists. If we were to see this as a vibrational point, I am pretty confident that this would have been at the actual low on price. So again, we see the unique special power of Venus, Pluto, here once again in Helio. Here's a historic low of 9/14/1953. I like to do some historic samples because it really shows how clear some of these cycles are and how often that they repeat. These are quite powerful repetition of cycles, and the concept that cycles do repeat is obvious, and I've shown that and illustrated it in the last two slides. So in 9/14/1953, this was a 3-year low. This low lasted for 3 years. I consider it historic because it was one of the great swings of the last 100 years. Chiron was 180 degrees to Uranus. So our planet of Uranus, 180 degrees to Chiron. Chiron being the planet of healing and adjustment, and Uranus being the planet of change. So we had an adjustment and a change from a previous high, I believe was 1949, dropped into 1953, and we went up for 3 years. How powerful are 180s? Quite powerful. How long is the Chiron-Uranus cycle? It's 144 years. This cycle being halfway through that would make it a 72. So Chiron is 72 years from its conjunction in Helio. 72 represents the fifth harmonic. 72 is part of a pentagram. The S&P loves to move along a pentagram. The 72 and 144 family, quite powerful. So here again we see the power of a cycle that very few people have ever studied or know about in any way, shape, or form. This again was 9/14/1953 low. The upper zodiac is Geo, the lower zodiac is Helio. Now we have a historic 9-year high, Uranus conjunct Pluto. This was the high that went into 1974 low. This was February 9th, 1966. This was again quite a significantly powerful cycle. Uranus was conjunct Pluto. This conjunction occurs every 171 years. So from a mundane point of view, we would look back 171 years and see what historically was happening in government, in big business, in perhaps silver or gold markets, because cycles do often repeat, just never the same way. This was a major high of 66. From this cycle, it dropped 9 years into 1974, quite powerful, and a 9 also being end of cycle or completion. So major create major swings, and absolutely the case here. Here we can see the combination between Uranus and Pluto, and how powerful it was even opposed, this collective over here of cycles. So again, Geo on top, Helio below, 1966, major historic high and low. There are probably about 70 or so dates in the last 100 years that I considered historic cycles, events that were big enough that would move the market for a year or multi-year. So anytime a cycle is multiple months or years, when it gets years, it's certainly historic. So I think 144 has a magic appeal. It's a magic number. And the probability of two planets at that particular degree changing are quite significant. So 144 from the previous slide to 171 from this slide. Again, quite interesting numerology. Now we're going to go to our current major low, which occurred on 3/12/2003. This is one of my favorite slides because time and price are actually proved for the first time that time is planetary motion. Time, as we understand it, is planets. This date was 3/12/2003. The event was Venus conjunct Neptune at 312 degrees on 3/12/2003. The odds of this occurring of time and price to meet is quite rare. Venus and Neptune were at 312 degrees in a Geo zodiac. The date was March 12, 2003. 3/12 on 3/12. This pretty much is definitive proof that time is planetary motion, literally. The odds of this happening are so astronomical, if it was just a coincidence, it's not. Major low of 3/12/2003 at 312 degrees. Again, quite outstanding. I've yet to absorb the power of this actual image. This slide, we now see a 2003 continuing up. The Dow subsequently took out 2,000, and the S&P has gone up to about 1380 at this point. 1414 would be 180 degrees from this low. So I believe the high for 2006 should hold at 1414, which is also square root of 2 is 141. So you can see here again, mathematical relationships constantly cross. It's a very powerful slide. This was our previous all-time high on the Dow Jones, 115,2000. Once again, we see what we saw earlier. This is why cycles repeat. Neptune conjunct the south node this time. Earlier, it was Neptune conjunct the north node. So here's our north node, and here's Neptune conjunct the south node. So when the north node was a conjunct of Neptune, it was a significant historic event. It switches, and it's a significant historic event. This is almost like a replacement or a cloaking concept. When one planet comes in, conjuncts a planet, and then it comes back around and conjuncts the other side. This is quite an interesting and powerful concept. And here, Neptune, one of the S&P rulers, conjuncts the south node. Again, a change in mass consciousness. The market dropped $5 trillion from this point on 1/15/2000. This cycle is very obvious to people who are watching it and who are aware of it. And again, at the time, I remember making recommendations for people to consider to get out of all their stocks. But since people don't know this inside of the stock market, they have no idea and they truly fly blind. And oftentimes using brokers who, my favorite line is, brokers make you broker. Okay, we go on to a new concept now. We did a few historical cycles. I hope that gave you a sense of application and to show that there is no coincidence with cycles. They're definitive for sure. Here I want to talk a little bit about geometry of time. Time measurements between swings are natural cycles in time. You can look at any significant high and go to any other significant high and do a measurement. In this case, it's 360. We know the circle is based on 360 degrees. So this would be a highly likely high in this vicinity because we were at 360 degrees, or 360 days in this case, or if it was months or weeks or years. Geometry connects regardless of the time frame that you use. This could be minutes, hours, days, weeks, or months. It's time. So the distance from this low to this high was 120. 120 is a third harmonic. It's a trine. From this low to this low was 90 degrees. This again is a square. It's a fourth harmonic. From this low to this low, B, A to B, was 432 days, weeks, minutes, hours. In this case, I believe this was minutes. This is an intraday chart. This is based on time counts intraday. This high to this high was 108 degrees. Again, 108 is a very powerful geometric number. We'll see that as we go forward. This high to this high was 390. This is a Mayan moon degree. 390 is the time it takes the moon to go around the zodiac 13 times. The Mayans used 13 moons, not 12 in their calendar. Here's a 72-degree measurement. Here's a pentagram. The S&P loves 72s. So as you can see, we do have some numbers that you might at first glance look to be kind of odd, but as you go later on in more depth of this, you'll see that a lot of these numbers are quite harmonic, and if you look at the harmonic divisions we talk about, they're right there. The 160 degrees from here to here, 160 is a novile. It is the fourth position of a 40. 40, 80, 120, 160. That's harmonic. That's a ninth harmonic. 72 is a fifth harmonic. 72, 144, 216, 288, 360. The 65 degrees is an 11. It is that irregular number we talked about. 65 family I call the U family, and is actually quite powerful, ruled by Uranus. So again, some divisions that make the difference in understanding. This is a geometry of time. We also do price, but in this case is a sample of intraday time geometry, and that's quite powerful. Here's going to be a sample of some price geometry. We can take A, B, C, D and do projections or targets. We can do the length of the BC leg and potentially look at the DE leg. So again, we have symmetry with geometry we talked about earlier. If we look at the 788 price on the S&P on 3/12/2003, and we go up in degrees or price dollars, degrees, dollars, cents, they're all the same. They basically have the same relationship. Time, price, they're all basically the same entity. and you can go up from the different numbers and start counting. From here, plus a sextile equals 1305. It's 180 degrees from the previous low. Here we have, if you add 510 from our earlier number, these are targets. Again, it's a way to build targets from A to B to C. 360 degrees plus half of a wheel. Each wheel is 360. Here's 180 plus 360, that's 540. I consider that a wheel and a half. So 540 degrees or points from 312 low would get us to 1328, which is a wheel and a half from this point. So the concept of wheels is actually quite powerful. 360, 720, 1080. Platinum stopped on 1080 to the dime, and it went higher from there. 1080 was a very strong resistance a couple of years ago on the S&P. 1440 would be the next high number of a fourth wheel up. 360 times 4 is 1440. Gold has a tremendous affinity to 144s. One of the significant lows to the all-time high on gold was 432. 432 is 3 144s. Again, fifth harmonic. So is it just random chaos, or is it pure mathematics? It is pure mathematics. So here's back to cycles again. Here we're looking at gold cycles and what moved gold, and how sun's influence on gold is very significant. And its aspects that create some of the pairings that truly move the gold market. At the low, we see a Sun-Saturn opposition down here, and the market had dropped into an opposition. An opposition means return to balance. So the market did just that, and it returned, went higher. There's no Sun aspect up here. It would have been another relationship. It dropped down into Sun-Jupiter trine. This was Jupiter also going direct in its motion. There's a direct motion and a retrograde. Direct motion, the energy usually flows in a forward direction or spiral, so the market often revolves energetically upward. Retrograde motion often will go backwards in its spiral, and the market has a bias to the downside. So Jupiter going direct had a positive energy motion polarity, and Sun was to Jupiter, which we know moves the market like 98%. So the meaning of Sun is a new seed, a beginning, creation, a starting point. And Jupiter is expansion in this case. So a new beginning of expansion would be started. So what did we do? We started a new beginning of expansion. And when we got to Sun-Saturn conjunction, which is an allied between a Sun and Saturn, Saturn's meaning is a new beginning of a limitation. Saturn limits and constricts. It rules the government, lots of constriction, lots of oppression. So what did Sun-Saturn do? It contracted from the expansive move upward. We drop down in again to a Sun-Mars. Mars creates energy, and a Sun-Jupiter conjunction. Sun-Jupiter, a beginning, a seed of expansion. What did we do? Sun-Sat to Sun-Jup, market goes higher. Drops into a Sun-Sat opposition. Markets are mean reverting. As the market came down into the Sun-Saturn opposition, Saturn limited the down move and had a tremendous amplitude. And in this case, I believe there was obviously some other major cycles here. This is usually not the amplitude of a sun cycle. So again, you can see how clearly defined even this collective of sun cycles are on gold. And then they talk about rulership. How do you prove it? Well, if this isn't proof, I'm not sure what else would be. This is the sun in gold on specific dates of specific turns with a language that I believe I've created as a unique approach to trading the stock market. Without the language and the meaning, all these are the same, and people do not have a real clear understanding. Okay, so again, I think this one's quite powerful. You can see a conjunction at work, you can see a 120, a 180, all divisions of the circle, 3 different harmonics. They were at lows, highs, lows, and the amplitude differential was based again on probably some confluence of some other cycles. But this particular slide, I'm trying to illustrate the power of the sun in relationship to gold, and also the power of Jupiter and Saturn and how they expand and contract. And they constantly go through this ping pong game, which we'll go forward and see another more clear example of that. This is a unique concept which is called planetary speed and tangent angle. I don't believe there's many people that have ever discussed this before. It's rarely seen, and it really is the diagonal of the market's trend. People talk about trade the trend is your friend. Well, in this case, the trend is defined by planets. Everything in the stock market, everything in the universe, everything we do is defined by planets. Planetary speed lines, the tangent angle. This is the diagonal, or what I call the missing dimension. Planets' speed affect markets' action. So as you can see in this illustration, if you follow these lines, the pink one being Mercury, there's the support of Mercury. Here's Mercury and Mars, red and pink together. And then this line would be the Sun. Didn't come down to that support. This line out here is the Moon, and this line way down here is Venus. You would be able to see the relationships between the planets and their speed and how they affect price. So again, quite a unique, rare concept. They also work in combination. A lot of times there's a relationship between Sun and Mars, and they're confluent, or Moon-Venus, if they were confluent. One of the higher probability ones, I believe, is Sun-Mercury. Sun-Mercury planetary speed lines have quite a powerful impact on an uptrend. We've been on an uptrend on the S&P since 6/14/2006. It has followed the Sun-Mercury trend line all the way up and has yet taken it out. So if you knew that Sun-Mercury was a valid planetary speed diagonal, then you would be long, literally, until the price crosses and closes below the Sun-Mercury planetary speed line. Again, quite a unique concept, and I think quite powerful. Here we go into Earth-Jupiter conjunctions. This again is one of the highest correlated Earth cycles that we have. I believe it is because Jupiter is one of the most powerful gravitational pulls on the Earth, and it is the king of planets. So Jupiter, being so strong, has such a powerful impact on the Earth, and when it's aligned with Jupiter, the markets turn. So in this example, I have